Hey everyone, today I'm reviewing Mount Eerie by the Microphones, or Phil Everham. It's the same. So to start off, Mount Eerie is very much a sequel to The Glow Part 2. So I recommend that if you listen to this album, that you should listen to The Glow Part 2 first. It's not necessary, but it makes the intro and the beginning of the album a whole lot cooler, as well as the story. Just kind of makes a bit more sense if you have listened to The Glow Part 2 prior to this album. Let's get into the album. The album is 40 minutes, 5 tracks, and to sum it up very fast, it follows the story of Phil either being like reborn after the Glow Part 2, or maybe like it's later on. I don't know. It's kind of up to interpretation. A lot of people say it's reborn. The basic gist though is Phil goes on the worst hike of his life in Washington up Mount Eerie. The reason it's the worst hike of his life is because he fucking dies and then he becomes one with the universe. It's an interesting album. The album starts off with a very prolonged intro. The intro track, The Sun, is the longest on the album by a long shot. It's 17 minutes and it is very interesting though. Phil doesn't even say anything until 11 minutes into the song. It immediately picks off from where the Glow Part 2 left off with kind of this droning that ended that album. It lasts a few minutes and then we have these drums come in and these parade noises and they all kind of combine together until Phil eventually starts talking. And from the end of that track, Phil is kind of contemplating Mount Eerie and kind of just himself and the universe and whatnot, and he does that a lot on the album. And then on the second track, The Solar System, Phil is kind of psyching himself out. He's getting ready to go up Mount Eerie. Arguably Mount Eerie might just be like a metaphor for something. I don't fucking know. It's a very artsy album. Personally speaking, The Solar System is the only song on this album that I can really say like I liked and I like enjoyed, and I'll get more into that in a bit. The Universe Part 3 continue Phil's climb up Mount Eerie, his contemplation. It brings up the beginning of the Big Black Cloud / the Big Black Death, which we're going to see later. On Mount Eerie, which is an 8-minute song, the 4th song in the album, Phil dies. He gets fucked up by Big Black Death. Phil also performs his closest thing to a rap song I think we're ever going to get. And then his body gets consumed by vultures. And then on the final track, Part 5, Universe, Phil is ascending and becoming one with the universe. He finally understands type shit. And that's the end of the album. Mount Eerie is one of the most interesting albums I've ever heard. It manages to fit so many different instruments and ideas into a single 40-minute album. I feel like a lot of albums that try to do this kind of story sound like stuff typically run pretty long, but Phil's able to do it in a really short amount of time in comparison to a lot of albums. And what I mentioned before is that I can't really say I loved this album or really any of the songs on here. It really feels like it's one complete package. Like I would not want to listen to one of the songs on this album unless I was listening to the whole album from start to finish. And that's part of the reason why the album is very interesting and pretty great, is because it feels so concise and put together, and like you weren't really meant to listen to these songs outside of the context of the other songs on the album. To some extent that also kind of ruins my enjoyment of it. I think the album is amazing. It feels like a super abstract, just beautiful art piece that I'm listening to, right? And it feels so well put together and just incredibly interesting and captivating. But at the same time, I can't really say I love the album. And I know that sounds like a really dumb reason and kind of an excuse, but that's just honestly how I felt. I thought the album was super interesting, but I can't really say I loved it or like I was super invested and emotionally attached to the album throughout the listening. I just thought it was extremely interesting. I mean, I'm going to give Mount Eerie by the Microphones a 9 out of 10. I think this album is incredibly interesting, retrospective, and it's an album I recommend everybody check out. That's my thoughts on the album. What do you think about the album? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Tell me in the comments below. Or say something else. It doesn't really matter. By the way, if you like music or really anything, I have made a Discord. There is a Discord in the description. Feel free to join it. Do whatever you want. But thank you for watching and have a good day.
You'll see what happens. Did you see what happens?